Well, hey there, and welcome to episode number 19 of Groove, the No Treble podcast, which you can always find at notreble.com. My name is Mitch Joel, and let's get on with the show. So, who are you and what do you do?
I am Rhonda Smith, and I play the bass. At least I try to.
Yeah, well, you do a fine job, Rhonda.
Oh, well, thank you, Mitch.
So, where are you in LA now?
Yeah, I've been in Southern California for quite some time. Yeah, I'd say probably about 17 years.
So this was one of those funny things where nor you nor I realized any form of connection, but I sent you, I guess, my email and my phone number was in there. And you're like, hey, 514, you live in Montreal. I'm like, yeah. And I didn't think anything of it. And of course, it turns out that you actually spent a lot of time here in Montreal.
I spent a lot of time. Oh, yeah. And it was a great city to listen to music. At that time, they really supported live bands and live music. You could go see great fusion groups. You could go see fantastic jazz players. It was supported by the community, so it was a great musical club scene at that time. A lot of blues, a lot of rock going on, where you could actually make a living and have fun. A lot of great players. I know that it's changed now a little bit.
Like it has, I think, in any city. So bring me back. Mm-hmm. You're from Halifax. At what age do you move to Montreal?
That was the year of the Olympics. I remember specifically.
76.
Yep. Yes. That was the year.
So all your formidable years in terms of becoming a musician primarily happened in Montreal?
Pretty much. Yeah. Yeah. That's where all the garage band experiences happened when I was, in my teens, because I probably started playing bass maybe when I was around 11 or something like that. 10 or 11.
And that was your brother left an instrument somewhere lying around. Is that what?
Yeah, well, I have two brothers and I have a sister too. I mean, they kind of everybody played an instrument, but I guess my brother Evan's instrument was cooler to me than playing trombone, for instance, or clarinet.
I love the randomness of life that like a brother could have a bass, because like my story was similar too. I think we're similar in age, and my brother played guitar, and I just thought I should do something else. And a friend had a friend who had a used bass, and like there's no, but it appealed to me. The instrument, it clearly drew me in.
It's a great instrument. It was my best friend when I was young. I had a lot of fun with it. Just the whole thing about, the feel of it back then, the way that the neck felt, and it's a whole nother experience. It's amazing to look back, and still be blessed to be able to play the instrument that you started doing because you loved it and you still do, and all the experiences that it has brought. It's really been lovely and unexpected and really great.
Now, if I look out my window and do a hard peek right and look with maybe a bit of squinting, I can see McGill University, which is where you studied. And there was a formalization of your passion for music. When did that happen? So I'm guessing early on you knew you wanted to play, but there's a big difference between playing, gigging, and doing that scene than getting some form of formal education around music. I always think when I speak to musicians, there is a gap between those two worlds.
Yeah, sometimes, and I probably still had a little bit of a gap. I probably should have stayed in school a little bit longer. And, as far as theory and just learning some other things, but I think at that time, I just felt that the application, the practical application of just playing and just having that experience was probably more important to me at the time than doing it the other way, because I didn't really see myself wanting to be a teacher so much as probably just a performer. That's where I really got more joy out of it, playing bass. Just the feel of the bass, if you know what I mean.
But
sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I'm saying in the rhythm section spot, and just that joy of when the rhythm section is right, which starts with the bass and drums. It's a great feeling when you have a great sound. It's a very fun thing to do.
So I studied music. You'll know this. You'll know the school at Vanier College.
Yes, absolutely.
At CEGEP. And I didn't go as far as university for my education, but one of the things that I reflect on a lot, and I think the power of Facebook has really brought it back into my life, is The other aspect of that life, I think, being a student studying music at the post-secondary level, is the socialization, like the people you meet and the places they go and the gigs they offer or the opportunities to jam in the jam rooms. To me, that was like, I didn't realize that there would be that massive of an intended consequence of that part of the formal education too.
Very true. Very true. There's so many sides to it, when we look back, and it's really amazing. Some of the things that you would have done then, but you probably won't do now.
Right. Yeah. Which is that what is that? Is that an age thing or what is that?
I'm not sure. I've definitely done some things when I was much younger that I wouldn't do now, like bringing in an amplifier, a very large amplifier, onto a school bus. That's not something that I would even consider. Or a city bus, just to get it done.
It's true. It's actually, now that I'm reflecting on it, I wonder there must also be a correlation between the sort of creativity of the individual and what they're willing to risk when they don't have a pedigree, a resume, a professional stature, which probably ties into that too, right?
Totally. No expectations.
Do you try and find that person ever again, though? Is that a hard place to go back to for you? Or do you find that because of the originalness of what you've done and always do, that it's easier for you to get back to that place?
I think sometimes it's easy to go back to that place. I try to be humble, definitely, and I always, music is I don't want to say a black hole. It's not a bad thing, but it's just a consistent learning thing, So if you're I won't say never satisfied, but if you always know that there's something more there, you keep striving to try to find it.
So, talk to me a little bit about what happens in your career and in your life. You're at McGill University, you're studying jazz performance, you're doing really well. Is it that you go from there to Prince's band? Is that how it worked, timeline, or was there like a lot of things happening in the middle?
Oh, there was a lot of things that happened. A lot of things that happened in the middle. It wasn't that simple. I actually made a decision when I was in school to not continue in school anymore and to kind of join a band, take a salary and go out and just work that way. So that's how it started. And from there it came, I started playing with a lot of other groups that were in Montreal, some other French-Canadian artists that were there. So there was a span of years that I was still in Montreal, but just being a professional bass player.
And really professional. Like, I think if people don't live here or know the region, they can easily glance through your bio and go blah, 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 blah. But like, I see names like Robert Charlebois and I go, oh wow. Like, I'm like, wow, like this is like super impressive, which makes me feel almost worse that I wasn't so familiar with your work when you were here and doing it.
I spent a lot of time playing with Claude Dubois too, which was a great guy and has a great music catalog. So a lot of time with some great French-Canadian artists too. The only one I really didn't get a chance to play with, surprisingly enough, was Celine Dion, but did meet her a lot of times backstage at Prince concerts or whatever in Vegas, so that it wasn't an issue of that. But she was one of the ones that I definitely was not able to play with at the time.
So when you see her, do you like instantly go into French mode and she's like, oh my God, what's going on here?
Well, I don't see her that often, but I'm not implying that we're close or anything. But.
No, but back in the day when you started a Prince show, I can imagine like you speaking French and being like, what time warp?
Yeah, that's a big difference. It was definitely a whole different world, Mitch. I'll tell you that much. Stepping into a Prince camp, definitely a whole other thing.
And I want to talk about that because obviously it's super timely and you spend a crazy amount of time with him. But I want to still have you express a little bit more about what. So you go from university, decide you're going to become a professional musician. Are you looking at that time as I need to join a band and get paid, as you said, or are you thinking like, who am I as a musician and bass player? What genre of music do I want to play? Or are you like pay the bills, work, whoever's going to throw things your way, you're going to dive on and be open? What was your mindset like in terms of the artist, musician, what you wanted to do with this thing?
It was probably a combination of all three, because it was definitely it's got to be about pay the bill. And at that age, it was, me stepping out, trying to step out on my own, so it definitely had to have some kind of support with it too, which is difficult to do as a musician, So I think it was a combination of all of those that made the decision. But those were just those are the steps and those are the things that you have to do. Like I was saying to some friends of mine the other night who are also musicians, were talking about things that we used to do. Like, I live in California, so we're talking about the difference with smoking in California. You can't really do it here. It's not in the clubs. It's a great thing because I don't smoke anyway.
Right.
But back in the day, we have played in clubs that were so covered in smoke. And I have in Montreal for so many nights, because Montreal is a town that goes late. You know that.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, what are you talking about? It's all hazy to me, my youth.
Yeah, and back when we were playing acid jazz in Montreal, down at the, I think it was called the Metropolitan. I don't know what that club is now.
Was it Metropolis or Metropolis?
The Metropolis, yeah.
Still here, Rhonda. Still here. Still here.
We used to have to start at after 1 o'clock to do those acid jazz and those after parties really, really late. So I know how Montreal parties, but we used to talk about that. You know, the difference is we used to play in smoke-filled clubs where people were right up front to you, smoking and inhaling in your face while you're playing. And that was common nature.
How are we still alive? I marvel at it. So whatever scene you were in back then, I was in the sort of metal punk scene. So just take wherever you were and amplify that stinking grossness.
Well, you know, I've done everything in Montreal, from rock bands to doing a couple of years on the blues circuit in between Saint Denis and all of those streets that are in there. All those playing all those little clubs. For years, doing wedding bands. I played in one of the larger wedding bands in Montreal that did a lot of shows, probably, I don't know, 3 to 4 a week. They were called the Showmen. I think they're still
around. They're still around too.
Yeah, I mean, I have so many friends there and so much history.
That's amazing. And
so I kind of got my chops that way, and I had to, do that stuff. That maybe some of it I might not want to do now, but it was a great experience.
And I think that's one of the, when people ask me about Montreal, there's a high level of culturism here. There's a high passion for music. And you're right, the scene has changed. But back then, when we were both growing up or growing into the scene, part of the thing that I always reflect a lot on the city is that it was very genre bending. Like, you could do what you said. You could be in a jazz band, a rock band, fusion bands. It was all somewhat accepted, and they all sort of had their niche. Like, people are surprised to hear how big of a metal scene there is out of here, or then how big of a jazz scene there is out of here, jazz festival. Can you reflect and think that, wow, it's true, like those influences actually are seeds that are planted in your own creativity and how you work?
Absolutely. And one thing I want to comment on, too, that I found it was a little bit difficult at the time that I was there, being an Anglophone Canadian living in Montreal. It was a little difficult. With the barriers between, a lot of musicians are great writers there. They get grants. They do all kinds of things in Canada. The Canadian government has always been, in the past, I'm not quite sure where they're at now, I will admit, in funding of the arts and so on and so forth. But all these grants and all these things have been wonderful for people. Yeah. And it has definitely helped a lot. But there was a bit of a problem being an English-speaking person there, because you kind of don't get the funding in Quebec, because a lot of it's for French-Canadian-speaking people. And you can get it in Toronto, but if you don't really have a Toronto connection, you know what I mean? Because I kind of didn't. I love Toronto, much respect. Still have some family in Toronto, but I grew up in Montreal, and those cities are not the same. So I found it a little bit difficult in that city to play, and kind of almost catching a ceiling where I couldn't go any further, if you understand what I mean, with the acts that I could work with and what was happening. Because they have some great French-Canadian acts in Montreal, too, which is great. And they can tour all over Quebec, but they can't go anywhere else, some of them.
No, you're actually highlighting a really interesting duality of where we live. One is that it's very multicultural, and because of that you have all the genres, but also because of the nature of the French dominance. And listen, as an Anglophone, I always joke, like, in Quebec I'm considered an Anglophone, but everywhere else in the world I'm considered bilingual. Right? My French isn't good enough. But the other part is that because of the nature of how this province is set up, both politically and to preserve French, everything here is its own ecosystem. Like there's own TV shows, record labels, music. Like it's a very unique part of the world that people sometimes can't wrap their heads around until they leave. And I think as I get older, I don't know how you self-reflect. Hard to do when you're in it, but when you self-reflect on it, it's actually pretty amazing that they've built this entire industry around the fact that just this province speaks primarily French. It's pretty crazy. Like it's a weird thing.
Absolutely, yeah. It really is an incredible thing.
It's wonderful. So my understanding of the story is you reach out to, or Sheila E. reaches out to you, and that creates this connection to a decade plus relationship with Prince. What is the story? Where are you situated in the world? What time of your life is this? How does this come about?
Well, I'm in Montreal doing the same thing, hustling with some wedding bands and doing gigs and doing a little bit of everything and trying to find some other things that I could do. Great friend of mine, who's still a great friend of mine, actually lives in California also, is Kat Dyson. I used to play a lot with her in Montreal, and she had an endorsement with a Canadian company called Godin, who makes guitars.
Sure, great guitars, yeah.
Yeah, and they had some great basses that they were coming out with at that time. And I think it was probably maybe 1995, 1996, probably closer to 95. So Kat invited me to go and play a duo. We were playing a duo with like DAT tape. So we went to the NAMM show in Anaheim, California, and we played inside the booths and started doing some stuff. And at that time, there weren't as many female musicians as there are now, I would say, even from a U.S. perspective. Because I do go to the NAMM shows every year, and we know people. There's a community of people, so it was really easy for us to meet Sheila at that time because there weren't as many females. So she kind of saw us too, kind of liked what we were doing. Then we met her again when we went and did the Music Mesa in Germany, which is I can't remember, maybe about 6 months after that. And she was there also. And at that point, there were even fewer musicians because we were even isolated. In Germany, there were fewer female musicians, so we kind of bonded a little bit more. But at that time, she was talking with Prince, and this was just after the Gold Experience, and they had decided that she was going to put a band together for him, a new band, and she was going to be the band leader. So she was kind of looking out for people that she thought might fit the bill. So she basically took our package to him, which was I can't remember what it was, some music anyway, definitely some stuff on tape. But as it turned out in the end, she didn't end up being in the band or being the band leader. It didn't work out. So it just took a twist, but that's how it started. That was the introduction from Sheila.
Now then what happens? You get a call to go down to Paisley Park, or you keep following up? Are you sort of trying to hustle this down, or? Yeah,
no, I mean, even at that time, there was, there's not a number that you just call, you know what I mean?
411, no?
Yeah, it doesn't work that way. So, I mean, after a while, it just kind of, you kind of go on with life, you forget about it, and then you get a call one day. So basically, I got a call one day, which was one of those calls, can you come in the next day or two? And so I did. And it was very eye-opening.
When he says something like the next day or two, if you say, like, I'm thinking about that, and I think, wow, like that's sort of like no time to prep, go down. It's going to be very spontaneous. Is that your reaction in your brain? Are you like, I got to like put some serious...
That's totally what it is. And I'm actually the opposite, Mitch, which I still do as a bass player constantly. I try to, no matter who I'm working for, I always try to respect the music, and I always tell people that. But I learned the music. So I like to have a certain amount of comfortability that way, but you can't always get that, which is a learning lesson in itself. And that's exactly what it was with him. There was absolutely no prep time. And on top of it, at that time, it was 1996, I wasn't really a huge Prince listener for bass parts. He wasn't a bass player per se that I was really into at that time. Doesn't mean I didn't like what he was doing. But I just wasn't focusing on his style as one that I was learning and, adding to my stuff, if you might say. So it turned out to be exactly like that. So completely kind of unprepared, don't know what's happening. And his catalog is so vast that it's impossible to be able to know that much music that quickly. And I think it was a day, because he's that type of guy. It's more like, hey, can you come today?
It's fun. I have a friend who's he does like stand-up comedy and improv, and he tells a story, and I don't know how true it is. It's probably folklore, but it's interestingly and similar, and I don't know why I'm thinking of it, but I think it's tied exactly to what you're saying, where somebody had requested something unreasonable to another comedian or something, and the person said, we just can't do that in this short period of time. And the person's response back was, this person is X, Y, Z, and they actually said something like, it could be 2 a.m. and Prince could call and say, I need a cow. And it's like, someone better show up with a cow. Like, because of the life that he's led and that he's been through, the cow would manifest itself. It wouldn't be like, we need a week, we need to get a license, we need to check with people. And that he did have that certain governance around spontaneity that really carried through his life. It's pretty amazing.
That's absolutely true. He was not someone you could ever say no to, or if he asked for something, you couldn't go, well, you just learned there's no point to that. It doesn't go anywhere. And in the end, he's going to find a way to get that to manifest itself into happening. And I've seen it time and time and time again when something seems impossible. Now, there might be some road wear. There might be a few people who hit the ditch in the process, but it does get done.
Amazing. And so you go there, and this is pre the Emancipation album, because that's the album you worked on.
Yep.
What are we talking about? Sort of tight jam session, deep conversation? What is the environment like for you in terms of, like you said, you weren't this massive fan, so you're going in looking for the gig. Clearly you want the gig. It's a good gig. What's your headspace like? What's the environment like?
It was crazy, first of all, and let me tell you, I wouldn't say I wasn't a huge fan of him. I've gone to one of his shows before then. Actually, I think in Montreal.
Yeah.
At one of it wasn't the Belton, it was before that.
The
one
Forum,
at
the Montreal
Atwater.
Forum.
Yeah, the Forum.
Exactly.
It was at the Forum. It was, so I was very aware of who he was and how huge he was, and just the amazing cat. But to meet him in person, I'll never forget the first time that I met him in person. He has an aura. He had an aura around him. To go into that building, it's just it's very magical. It's very powerful, and
it's got its own time-space continuum there.
It absolutely does, and it can swallow you up too that way. But he was very just majestic. He was laid out. He was clean. He had blonde highlights in his hair at that time. His clothes were, he was just his usual self. So, and what that entailed was we ended up jamming basically for, a couple of days, not constantly, but on and off, with him and I believe it was Clark at that time, played drums. So we just did a lot of trio stuff.
Amazing.
Of whatever it was. We might not have even played any of his music, but he wanted to try all different styles of music, anything from jazz to blues to rock to just making up jams and just, doing an evaluation. And he kind of assessed for me, I think, over time, once I got the gig, that he knew that I didn't know all of his music, but he knew that he could teach me. And I would retain quickly whatever he would show me. So I had to do a lot of work in the end, which was great for me because there's no better boot camp. And I'm going to do him a disservice and the New Power Generation, the whole thing, by calling that a boot camp, because it's not really. What his thing is and always has been to me is more like the special forces. Of the Navy or whatever it may be, Marines, whatever, is just that the higher echelon of training, being around him that long. In his ethics and the way he is, he's quick. He doesn't have a lot of patience for things because once he gets one idea out, he's on to another already. So,
are those days torturous because you don't know if you're in, you're out? How long? Like, how do you find out that you're in, it's working, you want to be a part of it? Like, what's going on? It's not like an audition, you head home and a couple of days later you hear yay or nay.
Yeah, no, that's a very long process with him. And I left for a couple of days after that. I mean, and had some great stuff happening between that, because in those 2 days, he actually asked me to play on Emancipation, which wasn't out yet. They were still working on it, still finishing it at the time. And one of the things that I did bring up there, because I tried to bring some different things, so I wanted to bring a fretless, because that's a Montreal thing about me. We like fretless players. Montreal has some amazing fretless players who grew up there, still live there. I mean, it's just some amazing players.
It's funny you say that, because that first bass, my friend of a friend's, it was the person had torn out the frets. I actually learned, without knowing what the difference, I learned how to play on a fretless. Right? So
it's a great instrument. And at that time, there were a lot of artists in the United States that were using a keyboard sample that was a fretless for bass. And I never really liked it, because it was pretty corny, but it was on a lot of pop songs, so they were liking the sound of it. I wasn't, as a fretless player, because it's two different things. So one thing I wanted to do with him, definitely, when I went up in those 2 days to just hang out with them, I made a point of bringing a fretless with me, and I'm glad that I did, because I don't think that he really had people playing fretless too much with him before. And he had me play fretless on 2 tunes, on Emancipation, and let me do a solo on a song that I really love, Dreaming About You.
Oh, great song.
So at least when I went home after that and didn't know what was up for probably over a month to come, just kind of figured, who knows? At least when I went home, I said, well, you know what? I got to meet Prince, I got to jam with Prince, and I got to play on his new record.
It's and so you're then notified, hey, you're in, or?
Well, yeah, but again, probably it could have been a month, 2 months later. I can't even remember. It was crazy, because I was still, and I was playing with other groups, and they all kind of know. I mean, that was a major thing to go down, I think, to try to get a gig of that stature. Mm-hmm. So, you don't want to say too much, because if you come back, you look like you didn't get it. So you don't want to have your foot in your mouth. So I had to juggle for a while the jobs that I had, especially the corporate job that I had. And as it turned out, I got that call again. Hi, can you come now? So it basically, and I was in another country, so
I have to imagine
I had to give everything up,
I have to imagine that during that time, Rhonda, you're like, just be cool, gotta play cool, gotta just be cool, but you're dying inside.
Totally, Mitch. Totally.
I love it. So you wind up spending 10 years with Prince. I mean, also somewhat unheard of. That I'm not sure if it's a story a lot of people really, really know. That journey must have changed your dynamics of being an artist and a player, because of just the ferocity of creativity that comes out of that type of environment.
Totally. It changed the trajectory of my career, of everything. And it was probably, I've got a span of about 13 years with him. I started in 1996, and the last stuff that we did together was in the end of 2009. And then from then on, I've been with Jeff Beck.
So obviously, super tragically, Prince dies. I mean, I remember I was actually traveling as well, and you sort of flick on your phone and you see a headline like that, and you reread it 5 times. In my brain, I remember thinking, Prince of where? Prince of who? Like, was it a Middle Eastern? Like, you just can't, it doesn't really click. Where were you when you heard? What was your reaction?
Oh, it was devastating. I was in my house having a conversation actually with another MPG member, and just seeing this, and it just seemed very surreal. That's the hard thing about it. It hits everyone differently.
Yeah.
And it's massive for people like yourself and people who respected what he did. He was absolutely amazing. It's on a completely different level when you have a personal relationship with somebody that you actually know. It's devastating. It's unexpected. It's just unbelievable. And I was with him when we found out that Michael Jackson died.
Huh.
And his reaction was, very bad then. But I mean, this is just on a whole nother level.
Yeah. And so at that time when he passed, you were already obviously with Jeff Beck. You've been with Jeff Beck since 2009?
2010. 2010,
okay, so,
yeah.
So talk a little bit about that now? So, I mean, it's sort of like very different types of music. It's different. How do you wind up connecting to Jeff Beck? What makes you want to do that? Because I want to talk for sure about your solo work and the work that you're doing with Chronicles of Every Diva. How do you loop into Jeff Beck at that point?
I was working with some other artists. I was working actually because I like to play all kinds of music. That's
Yeah,
what I
you've done
always
like
say.
Chaka Khan, Beyonce,
Oh,
Little Richard, Lee Ritenour. I mean, you've George
if it's
Clinton.
if it's good, I don't really put up a fence as far as boundaries. If I can play it, hopefully, or if I need to work on it, well, I need to work on certain styles. But I was actually working with other people, some other artists when I got that call, and Narada Michael Walden actually recommended me for the bass chair, and we hadn't played together yet, which was really cool. But I definitely wanted to play with Jeff, primarily because not a lot of people know that I have a love for fusion. Back when I was playing in the 80s and the earlier stuff, Stanley Clarke, Rocks, Pebbles, and Sand, and Jean-Luc Ponty, and a lot of other fusion artists that I used to listen to, Uzeb and all kinds of stuff that
Alain will be happy to hear it.
Oh, I tell Ellen that all the time when I see him
Me too,
in the
yeah.
States. He's really an amazing player.
One of the best.
Really, really incredible. But it's interesting, all those things make us what we are.
Yeah. And so, again, you get fed and connected to Jeff. He happens to be in need of a bass player. What's that relationship conversation like?
Well, that conversation was really with his management. Jeff had some, management, and his stuff was, I didn't really have a conversation with Jeff per se. They took care of their stuff really well. And I mean, it was just refreshing to go in there completely, apples and oranges. Jeff Beck, Prince, two absolutely incredible guitar players.
Icons.
Yeah, both icons. Just apples and oranges, two different ways of doing things. So Jeff was refreshing, a completely different environment, a little, definitely less stressful, and much more open musically. But I'm not saying just in the point of, it's a musical free-for-all. There is a lot going on, but he definitely trusts that the people that he gets are going to respect his music and the parts also.
Do you mean that it's more sort of, I don't want to use the word loose with a Jeff Beck, jammy versus the sort of precision of a Prince? Is that a fair way to talk about it or not?
Well, just in my perspective, Prince likes to know where everything is. Prince likes to control almost every single note in an arrangement or in a song. Jeff doesn't really look at it that way.
Interesting. And again, as a player and an artist, you have to navigate. Like, people don't realize it's not just notes on a fret. Like, you have to navigate the interpretation.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was great. And Jeff was very busy right out of the gate in 2010. I think we started with rehearsing maybe in January. The Grammys were right there. I think he won 3 or 5 Grammys right off the boat. And then we started touring with a double bill with Eric Clapton at that time. And I think we came to Montreal, too.
Yeah, I remember that tour for sure.
Yeah. So out of the gate, he was really, really busy for the first 2 years, and great music. I mean, it was a lot of fun. It was really, really a lot of fun to play, and it was different. So I really enjoyed it. It was good for me to have a change.
So
also,
in 2000, you did your first solo album, Intellipop, and RS2 came after. How do you do that? Like, how do you fit in, I'm going to do this solo thing, or, you're going to do the Chronicles of Every like, how do you fit that part into a schedule when on the other side, tours, dates, things, creatively, and not from your like agenda, I'm not interested in that, but just creatively, how do you know I'm doing this solo album, I'm writing this, but I'm on the road? It feels really hard for me at least, to think about how you pull that together.
Yeah, well, we're creative jugglers, definitely, and physical jugglers at the same time. I always say that about musicians. But, working with these artists, too, there's breaks, there's ups and there's downs, and there's times when we do absolutely take breaks. So those kinds of things allow you to slot those in, but they definitely have to be kind of premeditated,
And for you, in terms of writing, pulling it together, when you say premeditated, can you unpack that a little bit for me? Like, how do you make that happen?
Well, definitely with some of the records that I do, that I've done in the past, some of the material that I've had for a while. So it wasn't necessarily a break where I just wrote a record in a week or two. So it was definitely a cumulative thing. Probably still will be. Co-ed projects such as that's a little bit different because we do get together and write together. So we definitely have to make time for that. And again, that's a project that we have not really been able to do in the past couple of years because everybody has a different project, or one person gets a tour, or, all of those reasons in between.
What is touring like for you now in terms of your age, in terms of your interest level, in terms of what you're trying to do? Is it get harder? Are you finding more passion in it? Is it more sort of routine?
I think, you can get used to a certain level of travel. So, I mean, I hate to say it, I don't want to sound jaded or anything, but usually a certain level of travel makes it a lot easier. And that's for sure. So I appreciate a certain level of travel.
We're talking better hotels, better airlines versus van dirty, can't find the shower type of thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and even going as far as saying, business class as opposed to, coach if you're flying internationally, or if you can get those things. The economy is tough. It's a hard business, but I mean, those things make it easier. But I love traveling, like with Jeff, for instance, and with Prince. Those types of artists, they always go first class. The hotels are always great. Everything's usually taken care of. It's kind of fun to go that way.
And is it lifestyle for you? Is it do you miss being in one place, or is it? I know for a lot of touring musicians, it's the opposite. Like they don't like being in one place. They need to have that road. What's your sort of personality like?
No, because I have other interests. So, I mean, I like to be home as much as possible. I mean, I love to play. Probably, if I had to tour all the time, I probably want to do it with my own band, because it really does take a lot out of your life. It takes a lot out of your social life. If you have pets or or loves
children
in your life,
and loves, exactly, family,
plants, things that need your attention. It can be tedious at times. Yeah. Definitely. But for the right people, that's why it's great. I like to be able to have choice is a blessing, because it's always great to make music with people that you love. And when you tour, you're a family. I mean, it just is what it is. You spend a lot of time together. No one wants to babysit anybody. We want to have a good time, make some great music, and realize that it is a job too, and take care of the business at the same time.
Do you have conversations with someone like a Jeff Beck about where the industry is at? You alluded to it a little bit earlier in terms of, there are less clubs, there are less gigs. People are very finicky with what they're paying for, especially when it comes to music. I'm curious if you have those conversations, and even if you don't, what do you think about that situation?
Well, I mean, I definitely think that's the case, but I also think that, regardless of what's happening with streaming and digital music and this and that, and because that's definitely a whole other conversation, live music and music, I don't think it's going anywhere, and there is a craft to it, there is a talent to it that people are just in awe when they can see real artists on stage doing real music. It's really something to be seen. And I think the performers, if you're really good, you're still going to be okay.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like shows and venues and the quality of the audience and experience has really grown exponentially from that 90s, 80s thing. And I feel like, and I guess it's maybe because I'm middle-aged, but there even seems to be more of an appetite to pay for concert attendees for a better experience. And I think that that's really interesting.
It could be. Well, Vegas has shown a lot of us, over quite a number of years that those artists are really pulling in and doing absolutely wonderful. And the great thing about art and the music, too, about it is when you're really good, it's regardless of the style that you play, if you're really good and everybody knows it, they're still going to come and see you. Mm. I mean, if B.B. King was still here, he would still be filling the room.
Yeah, it's funny too because YouTube is a big pusher of that, where because people know I go down what I call the YouTube rabbit hole, it'll be like, 11 at night and suddenly it's 4 in the morning and I'm just clicking on related views. And people who do that will often send me something from Jeff Beck,
Right.
a video, a live thing. And it's hard not to watch it and think still now, 2016, unbelievable skill, talent.
Yes.
It's
Well,
crazy.
here's an example. And we've all seen some guitar players who age, or some musicians that age, and they kind of lose it a little bit. I mean, it happens. But somebody like Jeff, definitely, he's definitely had hand injuries. That's different from age, but man, the guy is incredible. Absolutely incredible. His technique, the whole thing. He's getting ready to turn 72.
It's crazy.
And it's incredible. But it's a feel thing. It's like the same thing. If Oscar Peterson was still here, I'd love to see him play.
Yeah. It's funny
I'll
because
be there.
it's so funny because the other month I was actually in Toronto. I travel a lot for work too, and I saw The Who. And it was Roger Daltrey, the singer's 72nd or 73rd birthday. And I remember being really taken aback. Band that I loved, not in the 60s, more in the early 80s for me. That's when I fell into them. And it's just like, I look at them and I go, wow, at that age to be that giving and that passionate and that qualified, if you know what I mean, like you were saying, just the skill to deliver on a stage like that, we take it for granted. It's not an easy skill to do.
Yeah, it's true. No matter what your genre is, even if it's classical music, and you're the bass chair in the orchestra, it's still the same thing. It's making your body and your hands and everything react and do what you tell it to do.
Has the world come for you to be more open? And again, I always preface this with my uncomfortableness in asking about it, because I asked Divinity Rocks about this, and I ask many people I sit down with. And I say this because I'm a middle-aged white guy, but you're a female musician, you're playing the bass. That side of the world, have we gone beyond it yet, or are we still not beyond female musicianship, females as bass players?
I think it's gotten a lot better, but there's always going to be somebody who's going to have a problem, and it's unfortunately probably going to be a man.
I know, I hate it. I hate it so much.
Chances are. So I don't think it's going to get obliterated, but it's definitely gotten a lot better. But I'm fascinated when I can go see a whole bunch of girls on the stage and they're just killing us. Like, wow, that's cool to see.
It's so funny that you say that, because you'll know this. I wrote for 10 years for Hour, which was the weekly alternative newspaper up here. I'm sure you came across it back in the day.
Right.
And because of that environment, which wasn't about gender, it wasn't about sexuality, it was the alternative. It was it was a part of my culture. It was part of how I was brought up. I never had that. Like, I never went, wow, these women are killing it. It was just like, wow, they're killing it. And when the conversation does switch to that, I'm always like, I'm uncomfortable asking about it. And I'm also always curious, because it just never really fazed me. Like, I never looked at them and went, hey, there's a woman drummer, or like, it just never, I don't know why. I don't know. My parents did a good job, I guess, but I find it really fascinating that there still is in this day and age that hang up about it. And I get that a lot, where people will say, about females and bass, and I don't know, like, is it that women aren't drawn to the instrument? Is it that women are not accepted when they are on the instrument, so they recoil? I'm always fascinated by that.
Yeah, I don't know why that is. It must be, starting from the beginning of time. Obviously, we were just handed guitars or piano. I think the guitar was as far as, we were maybe socially allowed to go. But maybe we're talking about, 80 years ago? I don't know. Maybe back in the 20s or 30s, I don't think that there were that many female bass players at that point. There were some guitar players, absolutely. And there were definitely female piano players, a lot of them. But you're right, maybe in those, same with drummers, there might not have been a lot.
Do you look, we named some of the names, so obviously Prince, Jeff Beck, your own thing, really a super group in what you're doing with Chronicles of Every Diva, Lee Ritenour, George Clinton, Little Richard, Beyonce. Again, we're sort of ping-ponging here and going from artist to artist. Can you look back on your career to date and think, this is the type of genre where I really flourish? Or do you still look at it and say, I need to have that constant different type of thing happening for me to stay excited about and passionate about being creative?
No, not necessarily. No, I don't have to have stuff, fireworks going off all the time. Absolutely not. I can stick with one thing. And sometimes I like a lot of silence. I don't even have to play all the time, Mitch, which is sometimes I like not to, to take a break and do other things in life. And then when I come back to it, it's a little bit more refreshing. Sometimes it's great to take a break. To take a break.
To take a bass or to take a break.
But for musically, because it kind of airs your brain out. But no, I don't think I need to do a million things like that. I really like where I'm at. I like the state of the business right now where it is. It's great where, we kind of have some choices musically. America's great for that. That's the one thing that I do love about America. And I hope that Canada is that way, or maybe pushes to get a little bit more that way, where they have just a little bit more styles, of music that you can play. And things that are supported to give a person a variety,
I think that's interesting. Like for all the sort of, like you said, it's a whole other conversation about streaming. As someone who's so passionate about music as I've been since I was, in my early teens to now, I think that I think that's where streaming really wins, is that, you're paying for access to this entire catalog versus paying for specific things that you hope you may like. And because of that journey, and I think, again, that YouTube rabbit hole is a similar example where you're sort of just going down the recommended views, that I think for a lot of people, that diversity of genre is ever present. I used to jokingly tell people that, like, oh, I hope I don't have a heart attack on the street because if someone sees my playlist, I'd be so embarrassed by what it is. But now I'm like, I think we have become really accepting because, and that's, I think, where streaming has won. It's not great for artists, we get that, but it does open up people's minds, I think.
Accessibility is a wonderful thing. I mean, the internet is an example of that, good or bad.
Yeah.
I don't think that I have an issue with the technology. I think it's great. I think I have an issue with the royalty rate.
Yeah, the compensation of how it flickers. I mean, I think right now, especially online, I'm sure you've seen this on Facebook, but there's that chart that somebody made about how many streams they need to generate as a musician to equal the salary of the average person who works at Spotify, and it's like ridiculous. Yeah. It's like 245 million streams.
It's impossible. Yeah.
So that's the devastation of that, and it's completely tragic. Rhonda, tell me, where are you at right now? So is right now basically working on Jeff Beck? Are you working on what else is going on in your creative toolkit?
Yeah, I'm getting ready for the tour with Jeff Beck. We're going to do a double bill with Buddy Guy.
Very cool.
And he's got a new record. Sounds really, really great. A little bit of a different style this time, and he's got some collaborations with a singer and a guitar player. So the band is going to change a little bit. So we're going to have some fun. We're going to start that in about 3 weeks. I'm going to go to England.
And is that going to make its way back to North America, or is that primarily European with Jeff?
No, it's a U.S. tour that starts July 19th in the U.S., and I think it ends around the 22nd of August.
Great.
Yeah, so it's all U.S. based. But I'm doing that, working still on my third record. I had done some stuff before with another producer and some other writers, but I'm kind of not working with the producer anymore, so I kind of wanted to take a look and maybe look at some new things. So I took a minute to refresh on that. So I'm still working on that record. Want to do my third one when it's ready.
And you're making sure your plants don't die.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The plants need love.
So people want to learn more about you, rhondasmith.com. Cannot thank you enough for your time and your stories. Fascinating, amazing career trajectory. And I'm sure that once people start even digging deeper into your catalog and the work you're doing, they'll traipse into the newer stuff with Jeff Beck and Beyonce. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for your time, Mitch. I appreciate it. I also think I have a band page on Facebook too, so that has a lot of current stuff.
All right, we will put up a link in the show notes for sure.
Thank you so much, Mitch. You have an absolutely great week.